Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a steamy Tuesday in the Acadiana region. We've got a hurricane and we've got two new disturbances. Really, they're the tropical waves that we've been watching already, but they have that designation of 93 and 94L. So we'll be going over that over the course of the show here today. We've also got some showers and thunderstorms that are starting to pull in, and I think those rain chances are going to get a little better over the next couple of days. And then a nice front's going to come through, and that should bring us a pretty nice weekend with some dry conditions and some slightly cooler temperatures. It is not cool outside here this morning, as temperatures have started here in the low 90s. At least we've reached the low 90s here for the early part of the afternoon. Still partly cloudy here at my house, but there's going to be some thunder in the distance here in just a little while. We'll look at the radar in just a second, but let's look at the cameras. And at least here in Lafayette, Breaux Bridge, and Henderson, we've got some sunshine. Things are nice and dry. And then out toward the west, Ambassador Caffrey is looking fine. Northward to Opelousas and Alexandria, also looking pretty good too. Now, we do have some beautiful conditions along some of our beaches here along the northern Gulf Coast. Another gorgeous day from the Florida Panhandle to Orange Beach and Dauphin Island this afternoon. And then looking at Cocodrie, starting to see some of the cumulus clouds kind of building there off toward the west, and you've got a few cumulus clouds, maybe even a couple of showers developing here over parts of southeastern Texas. And as far as boating is concerned, you're in pretty good shape outside of where those showers and thunderstorms will be. Winds will generally be southerly, about 5 to 10 knots, and seas about 1 to 2 feet. So there's your radar, and we do have some heavy downpours that are coming on to the southwestern Louisiana coast here around Cameron, and that's going to lift northward. So if you're up here in parts of Calcasieu Parish, over along the I-10 corridor from Lake Charles to Carlos over toward Sulphur and into Vinton, you are going to be seeing those rains starting to come in there. And then elsewhere, everything's kind of spotty. We've got some showers and thunderstorms here along that LA-13 corridor that's over parts of Evangeline and Acadia parishes. And here in Lafayette, we've had a couple of showers kind of pass by real quick, but nothing too significant. Hopefully, we'll get some little better rains for us that need the rain for our yards and our garden, but kind of still also to avoid some of the prime times of travel like dismissal time and the 5 o'clock drive. But we may be having some issues around that time. So do watch out for that if you've got to do some traveling. The changes are coming, though, as low pressure here is developing over the plains, and there's going to be a frontal boundary kind of coming off of that. That's going to move in, and that cooler, drier air that's behind that is actually going to start to work its way down toward the northern Gulf Coast. So after Wednesday and Thursday, I think Friday is going to shape up really nice with some slightly cooler and drier conditions. Here's a look at the satellite imagery of the Gulf. Showers and thunderstorms firing up here in the Yucatan Channel up towards southwestern portions of Florida. Then you got some showers and thunderstorms here right along the upper Texas coast. And you got a little bit of shower activity down here in the Bay of Campeche. None of this, though, is anything tropical. There is a bit of this kind of is part of the northern part of a tropical wave that extends down into the Pacific. And we can see that a little bit better here on the Central American satellite. You can see we got some decent convection here on the Pacific side. And then over Guatemala and Belize, we're getting some fairly heavy rains. You got some heavier stuff out here off the coast of Nicaragua and Honduras as well. And that's all going to continue to drift westward. But we're not looking at any development on the Atlantic or the Gulf side, but we might have something here that could develop a little bit farther down the road. Meanwhile, the Caribbean is where things are going to start to get a little bit more interesting. I know probably what you see right here is this spin. That is an upper level low, so that's high off the ocean surface, but we've got more of a surface low pressure area here, and that's associated with it, which is 94L, and that is forecast to track off toward the northwest and could potentially mess with the Bahamas, and then eventually it looks like it's going to start to turn back toward the north. As far as the U.S. East Coast, kind of jury's out for right now. And the rest of the tropical Atlantic, we have 93L right here, and then we have our solid hurricane, Gabrielle, which is still a Category 4 with winds at 140 miles per hour. Got a tropical wave right there. and another tropical wave right there. So all in all, we've got a lot of things that are out in the Atlantic basin. Most are pretty negligible right now, and even Gabrielle is not a threat to anybody, at least for right now. But Gabrielle is forecast to rapidly move off in this direction, and the Azores Islands are right about there, and we do have hurricane watches that have been posted. So if you've been looking for those 3-hour updates from the National Hurricane Center, well, now that we've got a hurricane watch up, we get intermediate advisories between the full advisories. So the next advisory on Gabrielle will actually be at about 1 o'clock later this afternoon, now that we have that watch in place. But here are the other two waves, 94L, which is right there, 93L, which is right there. 93L probably has a pretty good chance, and I think that's the one that's going to get the development. And at this point, it looks like it is going to be turning away. The other one, though, 94L, is one that could be bringing some range to the Bahamas. But I'm going to show you the intensity models and show you why it may not be something super duper strong. By the way, if you've been keeping count, only Tropical Storm Chantal, which was earlier in the season, that's the only named storm that has made landfall on the U.S. coast. So we've been very, very lucky so far during this 2025 hurricane season, and we still have several weeks to go, about 10 weeks or so to go. But the northern Gulf Coast usually starts to shut down by the end of October. So we are really in the home stretch. Let's keep our fingers crossed that things continue to stay far away from our region. So here's what we're looking at right now. Hurricane Gabrielle, packing winds of 140 miles per hour. It is moving away from Bermuda, which, by the way, is right about there. And it's continuing to slide off into the northern Atlantic, but it's pretty strong with 140 mile per hour winds, and the pressure has dropped a little bit. There's the forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center. And again, we've got those hurricane watches that are up for the Azores, and it could still be a hurricane as it reaches there. Now, that is something that's somewhat unusual. It's not really, this happens every few years that you could get a tropical system go that far to the east, but the only time we've had a tropical system stay tropical in nature and make it all the way to Europe was Hurricane Vince back in 2005. And we all remember 2005 was one of the craziest seasons on record. But at least on the National Hurricane Center's forecast, when you see the black circles here, that means it's still a full-on tropical system. H means hurricane, and M over here means major hurricane. But then when you start to get out here, you see where it turns to an S. That would be tropical storm. But because it's white, it is no longer considered a full-fledged tropical system. It would be either subtropical or made the full transition to a cold core low. So at this point, we're not forecasting any tropical system to actually hit Europe, but the remnant energy could be quite strong for Portugal and northern parts of Spain, and even the British Isles could be dealing with part of this with some very, very gusty winds, because those low pressure centers tend to hold on to the strong winds even as they move into the colder waters of the Atlantic. But the forecast trend is showing a downward turn pretty much for our tropical storm and hurricane force winds, and by the time we get out here to day 5, you can see virtually all of the models are down into the tropical storm range down here, with only a few that are still kind of hugging with or holding on to a hurricane. So that's why those hurricane watches have gone up for the Azores. As far as Europe, we'll have to wait and see, but about 5 or 6 days down the road, there's going to be some rough stuff there over the northern part of the Atlantic. So as we move on, out in the central part of the Atlantic, we have disturbance 93L, and this has a pretty good chance of becoming a tropical depression over the next several days, and right now it's still way out in the Atlantic Ocean, not bothering anyone. And we're just now starting to get some of the hurricane model tracks down, so I'm using the Euro on this one because that's the one that's, rather the GFS, that's actually kind of come down at this point. And this is an ensemble model, so you get the deterministic solution here, which is the black line. That's basically the one solid solution they have. And then all the other spaghetti lines that you're seeing here are kind of the what ifs. And you do see a spread, especially as you get out here beyond, let's say, day 6 and day 7. And you always have lower confidence in a forecast that's farther out. So when the lines are on top of each other like that, your forecast is pretty confident. And then when they spread out like that, you really start to lose your confidence in the forecast track. But again, this is going out 7 days, and you always will see that big kind of a spread, especially when it's something that's kind of new to the computer models. It was just a tropical wave. Now it's a disturbance. So the models are going to kind of pinpoint on this a little bit more. Fortunately, it is not showing any rapid intensification. It really kind of stays as a tropical depression or a tropical storm all the way out to day 5 here. And then perhaps a little farther down the road, this could get up to hurricane status about day 6 or day 7. With 93L, I do believe Bermuda, even though Bermuda has had several near misses this year, I think Bermuda is going to need to pay attention to this one as the forecast track is taking it really close to that area before it turns off toward the north. Now, 94L is a little bit different. It is weaker, and there is a low pressure area right about there over the northern Leeward Islands, and this is going to continue to kind of track off in this direction over the next couple of days. So, not expecting it to develop into a tropical depression anytime quickly. Maybe a couple of days down the road, it could be a tropical depression. But the main threat for most of the islands that are out here in the Caribbean, the main threat is going to be some of the heavy rain and just some of the rougher seas that are going to be out there. The Dominican Republic, Haiti, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, pretty susceptible to some flooding, especially you get those really heavy downpours, those tropical downpours, especially over Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti, where you have mountainous terrain. And of course, heavy rain doesn't work very well when you have mountainous terrain. So the low is now just starting to work its way through the northern islands, a little bit farther to the north of Martinique there. And it's going to move over to the Virgin Islands, which is right over in this area. Right about there is the Virgin Islands. So we're probably going to be seeing some decent rains coming into that area. New models, again, we don't have all of the hurricane models that have come out yet. We'll have a better suite of this as we go into the afternoon and especially into Wednesday. But the general forecast is kind of off toward the west-northwest. Bahamas are over here, so that would impact the Bahamas, and northern Caribbean islands would also be impacted by that. And then there are some models that take it kind of close to the Carolina coast, but the most part they do kind of turn off toward the northeast. But I will say when it comes to the intensity models, 94L really a little bit less on the intensity. Stays a tropical depression here for at least the next 2 days, maybe becoming a tropical storm going out to days 5 and 6, but then you see it start to drop off again. And some of the models also really kind of drop this one off going out a little bit farther down the road. And as far as the and I got a question here from KH. Is there something different about the Atlantic that's making all the storms turn north before the Caribbean? Really, what it has to do is we've got a big ridge of high pressure over the eastern Atlantic. It's the Bermuda High, but it's been a little bit farther toward the east. Let me see if I can find a map to kind of give you a little bit better idea. So what we've had is we've had kind of the Bermuda High that stayed over here, and that does tend to turn systems around. But we've also had a little bit more troughiness coming off the east coast. That's why we've had a couple of weak cool fronts that have come through, and that also aids in turning them to the north. And these last two systems, Gabrielle and I believe it was Aaron, which was a hurricane, the stronger those are, the more likely they're going to get pulled up with those mid-level winds. When a tropical system is developing, it's only in the lowest levels of the atmosphere, and these troughs that come off the east coast are in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. So sometimes these weak systems that are here aren't tall enough, or they don't grow enough to be able to get caught in these westerlies here. But for the most part, we've had this trough that's over the east coast, including the Gulf waters and that big ridge of high pressure off to the east. And that's why we've seen more of these kind of turning across the Atlantic Ocean. So hopefully that kind of answers your question on that one. So let me see back where we were going. We were looking at those hurricane tracks on disturbance 94L. And KH, the reason why this one is making more of a westerly track is because it doesn't appear to be quite as strong. So it's not going to get caught up by that trough that's coming off the East Coast until it gets like right next to it. So for the next few days, we're probably just going to see more of a west or a west-north or westerly track. And the good news is we are expecting it to stay relatively weak. I mean, tropical depressions and tropical storms can still do some damage, especially if they're slow moving and you get a lot of heavy rain. And I think that would be the main threat with this one. But I will say that most of the deterministic models really just don't buy into this developing at all. But that, of course, could change as we go into the next couple of days. And part of the reason we get a little more concerned about areas right here where a tropical wave would move through is because the water temperatures are extremely warm. And they're well above normal for this time of the year. And you got a lot of heat content, too, in that particular area of the northern part of the Caribbean. So sometimes it can tap into some of that premium fuel. It's not quite as high as what we're seeing here over the Caribbean, which is really one of the bigger fears, is if you get something to come across the Caribbean in that direction, that's where you start to see things that could really ramp up quickly. And then, of course, because it's in our neighborhood, we get a lot more concerned about tropical systems that are there. But there are a lot of inhibiting factors too. There's a lot of wind shear here over the western part of the Atlantic, so that wave that's right about here, 94L, it's going to kind of move into a lot of that wind shear. And then you also see that there's a lot of wind shear here over the Gulf waters, and that's why we haven't seen any development here locally either. Anything that tries to get going is just going to get torn apart by those mid and upper level winds. And even though Gabrielle is kind of entrenched in a high wind shear environment, the lower wind shear down here to the south has been kind of running in tandem with that. So if that continues to be the case, it could continue to stay fairly strong as it moves off toward the northeast. The other disturbance that's out here in the Atlantic, about right here with 93L. Hopefully I can get these all under my belt. But that's still going to be running through kind of a higher wind shear environment and might have a little better chance for development a couple of days down the road. So let's kind of look at all of the different models. And we're going to go ahead and start out with the Euro model. And first of all, just to give you your orientation, there is Hurricane Gabrielle, and then right here is 94L, and over here would be 93L. So hopefully you got your eyes focused on that area, and as we kind of forward that, you see how quickly Gabrielle slides off toward the northeast. And you kind of see a couple of low-pressure areas now starting to develop. One would be 93L, and the one farther to the west would be 94L. And both of those are fairly weak according to the Euro model. And if you notice that the 94L, the one over the Bahamas, really kind of starts to fall apart, maybe kind of grazes the east coast of the U.S., while 93L, which is the one farther to the east, does seem to do a little bit of strengthening and then starts to get caught in that trough and pushed off toward the east. But again, Bermuda would probably want to keep a close eye on that particular system over the next several days. Let's get into the GFS. And again, just to orient you, there is Gabrielle. These are our other two waves. Looks like I'm a little bit farther back. I got to go up to today here. So there's today. So you've got Gabrielle right there, and then you got 94L, and you got 93L right there. So kind of focus on those two areas over the northern Caribbean, and you see on the GFS, you see kind of a low developing with 93L, which would be this right here, but 94L really doesn't really seem to be doing anything there. And once again, I've grabbed the wrong thing here, so let's go ahead and take that off. And 94L really isn't showing up a whole lot right in there. So we'll go ahead and advance it. We're in the weekend here. And now we're starting to get into Monday of next week. And you see that the initial system here, which is 93L, is now starting to make its turn farther to the northeast. But 94L, and once again, I've done it again because I got so many of these boxes open right now. 94L just isn't showing up at all on the GFS. So like I said, you've got one model that's a pretty robust with both of them. Maybe some slow development, but the GFS is not too turned on by 94L as much as it is with 93L. Let's rewind it again. We'll look at the Canadian model, and we'll get to right here. There is Gabrielle. There's a little bit more moisture for our two tropical waves right there. And as we fast forward again, you see a little development on the Canadian with 93L, and then there's 94L over the Bahamas. Both of them kind of roll their way off toward the west. Canadian's a little bit more robust on developing both of them, and then they quickly both kind of shoot out off toward the northeast. But I will say the Canadian model is a little bit more robust on developing the one that's a little bit closer to the Leeward Islands right now and heading it off toward the northeast. Icon model, as we go ahead and finish up here, doesn't give us the PWatts, which is kind of a bummer, but there's your Gabrielle there. And our other two waves are about right there and right there, according to this particular model. And it will kind of move off toward the northeast with Gabrielle. And then if you look, you see a little low develop from 93L, and then there's 94L over the Bahamas, and very similar to the Canadian model, just kind of keeps the one on the left, which is 93L, fairly weak, but a little bit of strengthening there, and then both of them kind of rolling their way off toward the northeast. But this is a week from today. But the Icon model, I will tell you, usually is going to try to develop just about any low pressure area that's out there. So not surprising that we're seeing the Icon model showing two tropical storms or hurricanes out here in the next several days. Let's go ahead and look at the AI model. And we'll just go ahead and play this so you can see what Gabrielle is doing. And then you see that 93L over the central Atlantic looks to develop according to Google AI. 94L also may become a tropical depression briefly over around the Bahamas. But then it gets to a point that AI can't decide which is which. You'll notice a couple of these lows kind of moving from one side to the other and back and forth. At least the earlier models were doing that. But it looks like the Google AI wants to bring 94L up to a hurricane, and maybe 93L, and then 94L also could perhaps be a hurricane. And then as we go even farther out, if you keep a close eye on the Gulf, there's just not much coming in that direction, and we are taking this all the way out to October the 9th. So good news there. Maybe the Gulf is going to continue to stay quiet here for the next week or two. That would be awesome. September hurricanes, again, where everything is developing right now, here, and of course you've got Gabrielle, all right in the hot spots of what we would normally see during the month of September. And then as we get into October, usually you see your development here over the western part of the Caribbean, or sometimes along frontal boundaries that are pushing off the east coast. But usually anything that's developing, even down here, a lot of times will start to shoot off toward the northeast. And the same thing here, everything usually shoots off toward the northeast. Occasionally you'll get something that'll develop and come in that direction. But as you get farther and farther and farther into October, you start to get these fronts, you get these big troughs that come off the North American continent, and it basically picks everything up and shoves them back out toward the northern part of the Atlantic. So KH, again, basically very similar to what we've already seen for most of the hurricane season, with this blocking trough and this big ridge of high pressure keeping things away from the U.S. I'm going to have to go back and do my research to see when the last time we had so few named systems strike the U.S. coast. It's been a while because we've had some very, very busy seasons here over the past several years. Well, that's what I've got for you. If you like this video, click the like button for me, please, and subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications. And don't forget, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. You can also see me on TV again. I'm over at WBRZ Channel 2 occasionally here and there. I will be back there Friday morning for Tune In and their noon show. And then they have morning shows both on Saturday and Sunday morning, so I'll be hanging out with them there then as well. So I hope you can join me. If you don't get it on your cable box, I've got a link below. where you can click on our live stream if you want to join us. I'd really appreciate the visit. And also, please follow my social media pages on Facebook and X. And a big thank you to everyone who's already subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today on YouTube. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the showers if you can stay home and enjoy them. And hopefully you get a little water for your backyard. If you're having to drive, pick up the kids later on this afternoon. Just be careful because there will be those scattered showers and thunderstorms out there. You know the drill. You live in South Louisiana. You know how to deal with those afternoon thunderstorms. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Have yourself a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on Wednesday.